Welcome to Strength to Overcome, where we explore faith, pursue truth, and grow stronger together. I'm Matthew Morton. Let's dig in. G'day everyone, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I'm Matthew Morton, your host, and I'm incredibly blessed to be back with you for episode 55. This week I've titled it, What Were You Created to Do? And over the last couple of weeks and months, I've had a lot of conversations with business owners, clients, trainers, friends, people I walk past on the street. And what I've found is interesting. This keeps coming up. And although the conversations were from a different perspective, they all seem to keep coming back to the same theme. People asking and searching for happiness. They're searching for it in their careers. They're searching for it through money. They're searching for it through promotions, business, status. And I kept walking away from each conversation thinking the same thing. What if happiness isn't something that you chase, but something that grows when you're walking in the gifts that you've been given? I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with their lives because they're not living authentically within the gifts that they've been given. And I think a lot of people are trying to be happy, that word happiness, by doing something that they think is going to produce that happiness. But in reality, when people lean into the gifts that they've been given, quite often that's where you find peace. To me, that's the form of happiness that we should be striving for. And as I always do, when I look back over my life, I actually think this started for me a long, long time ago when I was a kid. And I don't remember it necessarily. I remember the story. I had a lot of energy. And people would often come up to my mum and say, you got to get him on something. He's wild. Something to settle him down, something to help him sit still or concentrate. You know, people would do it at church a lot. And she was the school librarian, which I've shared before. And so she'd get a lot of feedback from people. And essentially what they were asking or suggesting she do is telling her I needed to be on something like an ADHD medication. And so it wasn't until years later when I was old enough to understand this that Mum would tell me the story. And she never forgot. But she would tell me that she said, there's nothing wrong with him. That's just who he is. He's a high energy kid. That's his personality. And I'm not going to numb that. I'm not going to suppress that. And looking back now, I don't think Mum realized what she was actually protecting. In Mum's past, she's been gone for 3 or so years now. And so I reflect on this with the utmost sincerity and gratitude to her, because I think she was actually inadvertently protecting the very gifts that Yahweh had already placed inside of me. Whether she knew it or not, that's what I believe she was doing. And so that got me thinking, how many kids today are told that there's something wrong with them when maybe they're simply different? It seems like we've created this entire system where, and I remember being a part of this, even in private school, you've got 20 to 30 kids that are expected to sit in a classroom, all learning the same way, behaving the same way, focusing the same way, all having the same amount of energy levels. But every single kid in that room is different. Every single kid receives information differently. And they've all got different energy levels, different focus levels, different personalities, different fears. They all have things that they naturally enjoy or that they naturally avoid. And I even see it with my own two girls. They're 4 and 6. And already I see their personalities are completely different. And that's nothing special, but I've seen a nuance within them. Because one's got just a little bit more patience, and the other one likes things to happen just a little bit quicker. So they're both coordinated. I think they've both got really good hand-eye, and they'll probably both enjoy sports at some level. But they may enjoy different sports, and that's absolutely okay, because I recognize that. Because I don't think my job as their dad is to force them into something that I think they should do. I think my job is to help them discover the gifts that Yahweh has already placed inside of them, the very things that my mum was protecting in me many, many years ago. And my job, just like mum, is to encourage those gifts, to develop those gifts. I don't want to force them into somebody else's idea of what success for them should look like. And that makes me wonder if sometimes without realizing it, we have spent so much time trying to make people fit the system. And we never actually stop to ask, what if Yahweh intentionally made them that way, made them different? Because when I read through scripture, that's exactly what I see. Obviously, this is a faith-based podcast, so I don't mind going there. We don't see one mold, we don't see one personality, we don't see one gift. But we do see repeatedly a creator who delights in making every single one of us different. And for me, that's where this episode really does dial it in. Because when I look back, I can actually see two major careers. I've had a lot, which I spoke about in my testimony episode, I think number 2 of this series. But I've had two major careers in my life. The first one was carpentry, and the second one has been health and fitness. Carpentry started back in 94, 95, and that ran for about 8 years, and of course it's continued on in the background for a long, long time. But the second has been health and fitness since 2002, 2003, so 23, 24 years now. And I genuinely enjoy and have enjoyed long stretches in both of them. But I found a different kind of peace in one of them over the other. So when I left school at the end of 10th grade, I went into carpentry, which I've talked about a lot, so I won't get stuck there. But I was working in shop fitting. I was learning a lot of different trades at once, but I was building a lot of cabinets and a lot of bookshelves and counters for stores and things like that. Everything that goes into opening a brand new commercial or even sometimes residential business or property. And so I worked on businesses for banks, bookstores, a lot of pharmacies that were about to open, and I was working hard. I was working long hours, 16-hour days over the weekends, because that's when things are shut and you can get a lot of the work done. And I was learning the craft. I was becoming better and better at what I did because I had great mentors around me. But if I'm honest, even throughout that period of time as I was learning and dialing in my craft, I always felt like there was something inside of me saying that I was created for something different. And I don't think that there was anything wrong with the carpentry. I think it got me out of the system early, and it taught me a trade, which I've always had, and it's been very good to me, even for my own homes and renovating things around my own places and being able to sell them for profit and things like that. So it's been a huge blessing, but it taught me a lot of discipline as well. But what there wasn't is that fire inside of me that happened in the other career. There's a lot of people who have been blessed with skills in trades, not just carpentry, and they're incredibly good with their hands. And I had a lot of them teaching me, and I was really blessed. And I look back on those people and I think, wow, they were really doing what they were created to do. And I was learning that skill, a lot of left brain. But it just didn't quite feel like it was my lifelong career. I'll always have it and I'll always use it, especially if I get my farm one day. I'm definitely going to use all of those skills. But I remember particularly one day I was working on something that was a little bit mindless. I wasn't paying attention like I should have, and what I was using just slipped on some dust, and the blade fired out of a biscuit cutter and just sliced my thumb right down the middle. And everyone around me called me fork thumb for a while because I literally had a split right down the middle. It makes my stomach turn just thinking and talking about it. And for a while, my thumbnail was actually growing in two halves with this split down the middle. And so I look back on it now, and it was funny because they were making fun of me, pass the fork, stuff like that. But during that time, it really did make me stop and think, what in the world am I doing? I got the guy in the machines that's all he does all day. He's missing 2 or 3 fingers, and there's another guy over there that's, sliced his hand open a bunch of times and, kind of now has to work around it. And I started thinking, that's what I'm headed for. And I'm not sure it wants to completely be the reason to make me leave carpentry, but it started to create this doubt in my mind. It started to give me a lot of questions of whether I was going to spend the rest of my life doing that, or maybe something else that I was actually created to do. And so not long after that, I found myself in the fitness industry, which I've talked a lot about. I put that career on hold, went back to school, and went down this path of fitness. And so looking back, it's easy to see how everything was lining up. I never became a professional athlete. And I talked about this a lot in last week's episode, but Yahweh gave me a lot of hand-eye, gave me a lot of those skills, and he was connecting me through to not necessarily being paid to do it, but to help other people. And so over the years, I've worked with complete beginners, people recovering from surgery, people just trying to lose weight, business owners, parents, grandparents, grandkids, and professional athletes that have been at the very top. And so I've had a lot of really cool experiences. And it wasn't because I reached the top, it's because Yahweh was using the gifts that he had given me in a career to help other people who did get paid to do it and make it all the way to the top. And that was a pretty cool experience over the years to be able to do that. But it's never something that I planned. I didn't plan all that out. It just simply happened when I actually lent into the gifts that he had given me. And so years later, life unfolded again. I'm back in the carpentry career after a little bit of life-changing decisions and having kids. I wanted a bit more flexibility, so I stepped back into my carpentry career, which I've talked about. And it was during those years that I wasn't working out a lot, because when you're in carpentry and you're doing all these odd-end jobs and painting entire houses inside and out, climbing into roofs and attics, by the end of the day, you don't really need to go and work out, because your 8 or 12 or 15 hours was the workout. It's demanding enough. And so for me to completely out of the blue tear my bicep last March of 2025, it was another season that took me all the way back to the story I told you of, I think that was 2002, when I cut my thumb pretty badly. It took me all the way back to that and got the same questions pouring over me several decades later. Am I still doing what I was actually created to do? And so now I look back and I look at these two injuries almost like bookends, because one pointed me towards the next chapter and the other reminded me never to let my identity become wrapped up in what I do. Because careers change, and I've done an episode on career change. Our bodies change, our abilities change as we age. Life changes. You become married, you get kids. We don't get them, you have them. But you understand what I'm saying, because the gifts that Yahweh places inside of us have the ability to continue blessing other people around us for our whole lives, not just for a season, when they're used authentically. And that's when I started to see that pattern. The people that seem to have the greatest sense of peace weren't necessarily always the people making the most amount of money. They weren't always the people with the biggest titles, and quite often they weren't actually, well, they were the people who had discovered what they were naturally gifted at. They had developed those gifts, and they'd found a way to use them in service to other people. And so then I have another question that just flows through me. Has Yahweh already placed inside of each of one of us the very things that he intends for us to use? Because if that's the case, if he has, maybe our job isn't to become somebody else. Maybe our job is to faithfully develop what he's already put inside of us. So then I started thinking about all of it put together and all these conversations that I'd had. And I was reading through something that Paul says in Romans 12, and I'll read it. It's Romans 12 verses 4 to 8, and it says, "For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Yeshua, the Messiah, though many, we form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each one of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it's serving, then serve. If it's teaching, then teach. If it's to encourage, then give encouragement. If it's to lead, do it diligently. If it's to show mercy, do it cheerfully." And one thing that stands out to me there as I'm reading that, even now, is how he finishes. He says, do it cheerfully. I don't think he's telling us to do it with a fake smile. I think he's reminding us that when we're walking in the gifts that Yahweh has given us, then there's a different attitude. It doesn't mean every day is easy. It doesn't mean that there aren't difficult seasons or trials that come up within your own career path that you've chosen. But underneath it all, there's this sense of peace. Because if you're doing something that you were created to do, I think that there's that peace that some people have, but maybe don't know it. And then there's other people that see it and want it, and they don't understand how to get there. So when you read that passage, which I've done a lot over the years, I don't think I've actually appreciated it as much as I do now as I look back, and I am back in the fitness business. But that's what I see, is that cheerfulness of being able to walk away at the end of the day knowing that I have used the talents that I've been given. Now, not everybody has the same gifts. Not everybody's got that same personality. Not everybody has that same energy level. And nobody really learns exactly like somebody else. Not everyone was created to do the same job. And I think we've created this society where the system keeps trying to put square pegs into round holes. Instead of asking the question, what gifts has the Creator, Yahweh, already placed inside this person? We're asking, how do we make this person fit into the system? And I keep thinking back to when I was a kid in school, 20, 30 kids. I didn't fit in. I was always making everyone laugh, disrupting the class a little bit. Had my fair share of sitting in the hallway, which was funny because Mum was the librarian, and I'd be sitting in the hallway, and Mum would walk past. She knew I was in trouble, nothing I could do about it, or even in detention. I was never causing huge amounts of grief, but the system just didn't gel with me very well, and I was getting good grades, so that wasn't the issue. But I think the system's got a little bit backwards, because I wonder how many people, as they get older and have to get into their careers, how many people spend years trying to become or learn something that they were never created to be or do. And I think this is why you see a lot of people in their 30s, after they've gone to college, got their degrees, but in their 40s, 50s, even beyond, and they're walking away from careers that they've had for ages, years, decades. And particularly, I've seen this in the health and fitness business a lot, where people have left major business careers, successful careers, big salaries, bonuses, the whole nine, right? And they end up becoming trainers. They end up becoming health coaches. They end up yoga instructors, Pilates instructors, massage therapists. Not because they're chasing a bigger paycheck. On the contrary, it's the opposite. And quite often they're actually walking away from a lot more money. Now, why are they doing that? Because they're searching for something that the money couldn't give them. That was just checking the money box. But they were searching for peace. They were searching for purpose. They're still searching for fulfillment. Now, don't misunderstand me. Don't think that I'm saying everyone needs to quit their job and go and do those things. I'm just looking at it from my own perspective of what I've seen in this business over these last couple of decades. And I'm also most certainly not saying that society rewards everybody's gifts financially in the same way. It doesn't. Some gifts naturally earn more than others, not always fairly, but that's just the way it is. And, if somebody wants to make a certain or have a certain amount of income, then they may have to compromise. But we also have to understand that when we compromise, we may be inviting some level of dissatisfaction to creep in. And that's part of the trade-off. And I think about my niece, Chalk, years ago. She was looking at moving to America. She'd been out here for a while. She was looking at finishing her schooling out here. And when she got to looking closely into the college system, she realized that after finishing high school here, the first 2 years of your college are actually spent doing subjects that aren't even directly related to what your major is or what you actually want to do. And to her, and I look at it the same way, you're doing a more advanced version of high school all over again for 2 years. I won't chase that any further there, but to her at the time, it didn't make any sense. And it makes me stop and think how much of our education system, all the way from the minute the kid is put in daycare, all the way through primary school, high school, all the way through to college, it's built around moving everybody through the same program. And that is, unfortunately, it's instead of and direct replacement of helping people actually discover the gifts that they've been given. And so I'm not saying education is bad. You need to learn to read and write and math and some science and understanding the world we live in. But I am simply asking, are we helping people discover who they were created to be? Or are we narrowing everyone's choices down until they fit into the careers that we've decided as a society that are successful? And I think we all understand what that looks like because we all look down our noses at some careers thinking they didn't make it or they're no good or I'm better than them. I mean, you think about it. You want to have your nose frowning on a plumber that's working around toilets all day, but you want to call him on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock because your toilet won't flush and the whole house is backing up. You're going to pay a pretty penny for it. But we have this stigma in society where we look at certain careers and we judge people. And so we've got this predisposed list of careers that we want to fall into or we want our kids to fall into, which I don't think is right. And I think back to what's taught in the parable of the talents. This is found in Scripture in Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 to 30. And we're not going to go through the whole parable because that's not what today's about. But here's the big picture on it. One servant receives 5 talents, another receives 2, and another receives 1. And there's a lot of different interpretations of this, but today I'm going to use it this way because here's what I see interesting. I see the servants that put their talents to work produce fruit, results. And there's one servant that buries his talent so that it preserves itself. So when the master returns, he can show, I kept it safe. And I think that's something that we should all be thinking about. Because how many of us actually have gifts that we've never really developed? Maybe we're afraid, maybe we're scared, maybe we don't think we're good enough, but we bury them. And then we go to town spending years, decades chasing somebody else's gifts, somebody else's dreams for us, somebody else's definition of success for us. And some of those gifts that Yahweh has built into our DNA were never meant to stay that buried. They were meant to be developed. They were meant to grow. They were meant to bear fruit. And I've done this where I think myself and a lot of other people, we're waiting for their gifts to somehow change their lives, but they're buried. We're not even putting them to work. We're just waiting for some opportunity to come along. Peter in 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 10 says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as faithful stewards of Yahweh's grace in its various forms. So I love this because Peter's not saying figure out someone else's gift. He's saying each has received a gift. Everyone's got a talent. Every single person, myself, everybody that's listening to this has a gift. You've got a talent. And so it's not a matter of has he given me something? The question is, have you discovered what it is? And if you have you developed it? Are you using it? And even more importantly, are you using it to serve other people? Because I honestly believe that is where real peace begins. It's not when we become somebody else, it's when we become the person that we were created to be and use that talent, that gift to serve others. So where does all that leave us? Because the episode's not about careers. As I was writing this script, it's becoming, in my mind, the person that you were designed or built in with talents to becoming. Because when we read in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, Paul's writing and he says, for we are his, the Creator's workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which Yahweh prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. I have always loved that verse because it's not saying we accidentally stumble into our purpose or wait for someone to come along and use our skill. But it does say that we were created for good works, that Yahweh the Creator prepared beforehand. And so when I read that, it tells me my job isn't to invent a purpose. My job is to discover it. I want to develop it. And then as I continue to do that, I have to faithfully walk in it. And for me, that meant I had to go through this realization over the last 15, 16 months that I wasn't supposed to spend my life walking in a talent that I had, but wasn't serving anybody else. I was supposed to discover my own path of something that's been burning inside of me for a long, long time. And so that's where I started this podcast, and to develop it into serving other people. And that's been really challenging for me, because I'm not trying to say everyone needs to go out and do something that only comes naturally to you. I don't believe that at all, because for me, as I was mentioning with my podcast, I've had to constantly through this process develop new skills. And for me, it has really challenged me to step outside of my comfort zone to learning some of those things. So I think it's healthy to challenge ourselves, and that's how we grow. But to me, here's the huge difference, because developing those skills and trying to build your whole life around something that was never meant to really be your gift in the first place is where it can come unglued. I think one of the gifts that Yahweh has given me is helping people become healthier. There's a lot of apps out there and YouTube videos that people can use in today's training world, but I believe He's given me that gift to help people through beyond what those things can provide. He's given me a skill in helping people find ways to move better, to be able to play sports again or keep doing them into their 70s and 80s. And so I've spent well over 2 decades doing that, 40,000 sessions plus and counting. But I also find myself now in front of camera once a week, podcasting. And I'm trying to help people. And so I have got to learn now the skills around that, because that involves public speaking. It involves learning operational systems, editing, social media. This is partly why there was a huge break for a while there when I took over the reins of this part of the podcast. And it took me a while because I had to learn how to take the ums and the ahs out of my speech, which I'm still learning and crafting. Those things aren't the gift. Those are the skills that I'm developing so that the overall gift can help me reach more people. So I'm not trying to invent a whole new gift. I'm trying to get better at using the one that He already gave me. And for me, that's the important distinction here that I want to make very clear, because even Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, according to Scripture, and many scholars, it says in Ecclesiastes 3, verse 12 to 13, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This is the gift of Yahweh. It's always been a favorite passage of mine because it reminds me that finding satisfaction in what you do is itself a gift. And it's most certainly not because every day is easy. Not every day is exciting, even if you are passionate about what you do. But there is something deeply satisfying about doing what you were created to do. And so maybe you're listening to this. Maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not in a career right now. Maybe you're retired. Maybe you are at home raising young children. Maybe you are caring for a family member, your mom, your dad, your husband, your wife, or somebody else. This episode And what I'm saying is really important for you too. Because I don't think your gifts show up just in what you deem as your career, that LinkedIn title, job description. I think your gifts and your talents, they show up in every season of your life. And so some people have an incredible gift of raising children. I've met them. They're unbelievable. They're just unflappable. And others have an incredible gift of caring for other people. That's a very unique gift. Takes a lot of patience, a lot of heart. Boy. There are other people that have an incredible gift of encouraging people. They're always helping and lifting other people up. And some people are really good at listening. There's other people that are just absolute worker bees, and they serve and they serve and they serve, and they're constantly giving their time. And they're always available for someone at any time when they're needed. And those things have tremendous value. They matter. You matter. Just because somebody is not necessarily paying you to do them doesn't make it any less important. You are still using your gift that you were created to use. So if you're in one of those seasons where you feel like your purpose may have disappeared or it's temporarily on hold, I'm going to encourage you to fill your days as much as possible with things that are centered around the gifts that the Creator has given you. Because your career could change. You could retire. Other things can take place where you don't have that career anymore. And your season of life will change. It's not, a matter of if, it's when. Everyone's does. But your gifts are your gifts your whole life. So I want to leave you with the challenge this week, as I did last week, something tangible to do and to take away here. Go grab yourself a piece of paper, and I want you to write down 5 things that people naturally come to you for. Now, these aren't things that you wish you were good at, or what pays you the most money, or what your parents want you to become. These are things that people naturally seek you out for. Maybe they ask you for advice. Maybe they ask you to fix something. Maybe they ask you to teach them something. They might look for some encouragement. You may be really good at organizing things and they just need your help to put it all where it needs to be. Maybe they want some guidance on how to solve some problems. They might ask you to come in and just lead, so they've got an example and someone to follow. Whatever those things are, doesn't have to be anything in there. It could be something completely off there. Maybe you're good at milking goats. But write these things down and then ask yourself one question. Have I been developing the gifts that the Creator has already given me? Or have I spent years, decades, maybe a whole lifetime at this point, wishing that I had developed somebody else's? Because when I look back on my life, my career, I was that high energy kid. And I went into carpentry, into health and fitness, into coaching, into working with professional athletes. And now I'm sitting behind this camera every week. And I don't think Yahweh was ever randomly closing and opening these doors. I think he was, over these years, patiently teaching me to become the person that he had already created me to be. And maybe that's what he's doing in your life too. Maybe this happiness, maybe this peace that you've been searching for has actually been hidden in the gifts that he gave you all along. And so this week, take some time, grab that piece of paper, write down the 5 things that people naturally come to you for, and spend some time really thinking on them. Pray on them. And regardless of where you are in the process of even identifying them or understanding them, give yourself the peace. Give yourself the patience and the grace and the mercy to just keep figuring it out. Because discovering the gifts that Yahweh has given you is not something that's going to happen overnight. For a lot of people, it happens much later in life, and it's not too late because it's the journey. And I think that that journey is one worth taking, regardless of where you are in life. Stay strong, everyone. I look forward to next week. I'll catch you then. Cheers.